Welcome to NASCAR Monster Energy Cup Series qualifying presented by Ford Performance. Cars beginning to roll off of pit road as we get ready for a very unique situation. Qualifying and racing on the same day. It's been over 45 years since the top level of NASCAR has qualified and raced on the same day. The opportunity for teams to have a two-day event here in Pocono. The two practices, 2 hour-long practices, were yesterday. The weather has been very accommodating. Both practices yesterday in the morning and early afternoon. And now the teams will go out and qualify once again. Group qualifying taking place here at Pocono. Alongside Jeff Burton, Steve Letarte, I'm Rick Allen as we get ready for the first cars to take time. Once again, it will be 3 rounds. The top 24 will advance to round 2. It's Eric Almirola behind the wheel of the 43 out on the track first.
And Rick, I'm not so sure that qualifying today matters much to these drivers. They've all grown up doing this, grow up racing late models or dirt, asphalt, whatever, and you always do everything on one day. So for the drivers, I don't think it's much of a big deal, but for the team, Steve, it certainly changes how they approach today.
Well, preparation. I mean, when qualifying ends, it's basically 2.5 hours from the green flag, and you need to understand that you have to give your driver the best opportunity to perform, and what that means is not putting any sort of qualifications on it. Don't say, hey, get a good lap, but we can't afford to wreck. Don't do this, don't do that. You have to let your driver go out and perform, and that's taking risks, as you see Ryan Blaney right there go through that bump in 1 and 2, chase it up a little bit close to the wall. So the backup car has to be ready. Mechanically, you have to be prepared. You have to have your team prepared in case there is an accident or a mechanical failure. You have time to get ready for the race.
And this is really no different than what we see the Xfinity teams and the trucks teams do pretty much every week as they qualify on the same day that they race. So this isn't unprecedented in the current NASCAR situation.
One of the other things that's unique about this is normally during qualifying, they qualify obviously for their starting positions, but also how they pick pits. But because this is a 2-day event and the race will happen, as Steve mentioned, about 2.5 hours after the qualifying ends, they have already picked pits based upon Indianapolis. So Kyle Busch, who won the pole a week ago at Indianapolis, he chose pit stall number 1. This qualifying session will determine pit selection for next week's race in Watkins Glen. Last week's winner, Casey Kane, shaking up the playoff standings. He goes across the finish line. His lap is second quickest of the 4 that have already taken time. What an opportune time it was for Casey Kane as he was able to hold off the hard-charging Brad Keselowski and everyone else late in this race. The opportunity was that Casey Kane came onto pit road just before a caution came out, which gave him the opportunity to have fresh tires and fill it full of fuel before anyone else was able to take advantage of that. And it ended up putting Casey Kane in victory lane at one of the most famous racetracks in the world.
That pit strategy put Casey Kane in position to go win that race, but what he did on the racetrack ultimately won it. You think about that restart where it came off turn 2 on the inside of Brad Keselowski, sideways in the side of Brad Keselowski. Then they entered turn 3. He was in the middle of turn 3, came out with the lead. And then that last restart, Casey Kane stepped up to the plate in a big time and took the race from Brad Keselowski.
As we're watching Trevor Bayne make laps here at Pocono, let's go to Marty Snyder.
And Rick, down here where we start most qualifying sessions, back in inspection, right? All these cars you see back here have made it through inspection. Kyle Busch among those. Eric Jones just now literally went out on the racetrack. Danica Patrick is back here as well. Chris Buescher and his team have to go back through inspection. They actually passed inspection, and then they maybe manipulated the body a little bit, NASCAR is saying, so they had to go back through inspection. They're in stage 1 of inspection, so a lot of teams back here trying to get out on the racetrack. But again, 20 minutes here in round 1 shouldn't be that much of a factor for these race teams. But Jeff, I know as a driver, you never want to start qualifying back here in the garage area, do you? Having to scramble out kind of upsets the day a little bit when you're going out to qualify.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And The other component to this, Marty, is that this is tech for the race as well. So when they go through this tech going to qualify, that's the way they're going to present their car for the race as well. There is no tech for the race. This is the tech for qualifying and the race. So NASCAR has to make sure that these teams the cars are 100% correct for both of these in one shot.
It's one of the other unique things about this qualifying session, and then racing just 2.5 hours after qualifying is over, they'll use these tires. So once they're done with qualifying, that's the tires that they will start the race on. They are not allowed to change tires after qualifying.
How about that lap by Michael McDowell sitting there in 5th, just behind Harvick and ahead of Menard, Bain, ahead of Austin Dillon, out-qualified Dale Earnhardt Jr. Great lap. That team continues to show that they can race with these big guys. Great job.
Dale Earnhardt Jr. currently 6th of the 10 that have been out on the racetrack. It's Ryan Blaney currently fastest in this first session. The giant flag in the infield, just off of where the garage area is, blowing fairly hard, and it's going from turn 2 to the straightaway. So might not be a lot of help, other than it might push them a little bit as they go from turn 2 to turn 3, as we see Daniel Suarez just completing his lap, and Suarez is now the fastest at Pocono.
You mentioned that wind, Rick, and I think it's important to just understand where it is over the course of the weekend, because if it changes direction, it can affect the handling. We saw right here the 18 of Kyle Busch, probably I would have to say the favorite after looking at practice as far as raw speed. Unfortunately for Kyle Busch, that's happened a lot this year, but he's yet to go to victory lane. So that's a crosswind right here getting into turn 1. But as he turns through the middle of turn 1 and comes on the exit, now he's kind of going through that wind. And Jeff, I don't know, wonder if that actually doesn't help the car turn. Putting air onto the right front fender, same thing going into the tunnel if it doesn't help the car turn into the tunnel better. Yeah, that's right. I think the direction of the wind could be advantageous, but it's not blowing in a direction that is, I don't think, negative anywhere. Right. It's not blowing from turn 3 toward turn 1, or vice versa. One of the other things about this track that's very unique is the fact that there are trees almost all the way around from turn 1 all the way through to turn 3. So the way the wind blows now, the trees are almost blocking the track as well from turn 1 all the way into turn 3. Marty.
And Rick, we were talking during commercial. We saw Denny Hamlin taking his lap right here. Where will Hamlin go? Go to 7th fastest right now. He went very slow on the apron. Jeff and Steve, I think you guys were wondering why he was going so slow on the apron for almost a quarter of a lap. And I talked to Mike Wheeler about why that is. He said because these are our race brakes, obviously. He said rather than sort of shocking them for the first time and getting on them really hard going into turn 1, I wanted Denny to go slowly around the apron, kind of work the brakes in a little bit, Steve, and then they would be ready for turn 1, because obviously these have to last us for 400 miles today. So that's why the 11 was going so slow on the racetrack, trying to work those brakes in since they have to use them for the race. Well, I'm glad Marty got the report, because Jeff and I couldn't figure it out. We had no idea. And the reason, Rick, is we were thinking tires. Right. And this out lap is so long, you can get temperature in your tires. That wasn't an issue. But one more small nuance. We talk about this schedule and how it's very different. I'm a little surprised just because you can, on machines, you can work the brakes in. It's called bedding. Basically, you run the rotor and the pad combination together. The rotor's all prepped and ready to go. But it sounds like it's more of a temperature thing. They just don't want to go from ambient to north of 1,200 degrees in one shock, trying to get some temperature into it. But brakes were a huge topic here in the spring, Jeff. A lot of cars had trouble. So the 11 already thinking ahead, trying to make sure they're, I won't say guaranteeing, but improving their chances of having brakes all afternoon. Yeah, brake trouble here isn't just a matter of going slower. It's a matter of keeping from hitting the wall at a high pace. We've seen people have trouble, and it always seems to happen at the worst place. And going into turn 1, approaching 200 miles an hour, get on the brakes and have a failure. We've seen some big wrecks there.
Steve, let me ask you, as I've just noticed that the 18 has made his way back onto pit road. You had mentioned earlier you thought that Kyle Busch could be one of the favorites, and I look at right now on the left side of our screen, the scoring monitor, Kyle Busch 16th. So way down the list here as far as his qualifying run. Is that because he's maybe thinking ahead that maybe that run right there doesn't need to be a great lap for him, and he can bring it in the second and the third rounds?
Absolutely. Top 24. All Kyle Busch needs to be is in the top 24. This is not new pavement anymore. Even though we talk about it like it's new, it's now been multiple years, and the lap times are falling off for multiple runs, Jeff, so he's saving some tire. But we were talking about the spring race and those brake issues after getting that report from Marty about trying to protect those front brakes and not shock them. Well, if we go inside and we look at the brakes, it really comes down to cooling. So you see the air goes through the nose, it goes back, it cools the brakes. Well, as a driver, you would want 2 hoses. Keep those brakes nice and cool so you have brakes all day. But as a crew chief, Jeff, I want to take a hose away. I want to add some tape to the front, add that downforce.
Yeah, that downforce is what every driver wants also. The problem here, what makes this all more difficult, is look at Jimmy Johnson have trouble, loses brakes in turn 1, major impact. Then on the same lap of the same race, Jamie McMurray right behind him had the same problem, had same brake problem. So the question is that too much heat or not enough heat? The problem here to Casey Kane problem, you see where he had it and ends up getting in the wall before the corner. If you're going to have a brake problem, that's the way you want to have it. But what makes this racetrack so difficult is the length of the straights. As Martin Truex Jr. went to the top of the board, the lengths of the straights make this a much more difficult brake cooling issue because you get those heat spikes. The brake rotors get very hot, and then you have these long straights that air coming through the nose is cooling the rotors. Well, you get them really cool, and then you go to the turn 1, you jump on those brakes, and it spikes them again, and the rotors fail. So it's easy to say, hey, keep them cool, and that's better, but we've seen cooling them too much actually can cause a problem.
Well, and as we were talking about the brakes, Martin Truex Jr., as you mentioned, Jeff, goes to the top of the board. Well, Rick, you talked about the 18, who's now down in the 17th position, saving a little tire. I actually think these are the 2 favorites for the day, and after going back to Indianapolis and seeing how dominant they were there, I don't think that's a surprise. They were so fast at Indy, but Jeff, they were fast, but they couldn't get their cars to the finish at Indianapolis. They got in that trouble on that restart, and that really was the start of the chaos at the Brickyard.
That was the start of the chaos. Right here, 2 cars that dominated the race all day. They had worked together on restarts. Kyle Busch and his team decided no longer time to work. We're here to race. We're here to get that track position. Martin Truex Jr. got loose underneath. You see Joe Gibbs in disbelief. But that's what happens when 2 drivers are racing hard and digging for a win.
And it wasn't just drivers. Then we had some action on pit road after that accident, Rick.
Where to go? Well, now you want to race? Have you let off? What I want to beat you? I don't care. Get out of my box. I don't care who you are. Get out of my box. All right, pal. I don't give a who you are. Get out of my box. All right, cowboy. Tough guy. I am. Oh, good for you. Hey, man, just walk the away. Go on.
And what transpired after that, just so that you get the backstory, Joe Gibbs Racing leases a pit crew to the 78 team of Martin Truex Jr. 2 members of the 78 team were suspended by Joe Gibbs Racing for that altercation. So it wasn't a NASCAR suspension. It was an internal suspension by Joe Gibbs Racing that 2 of the pit crew members for the 78 team have now been suspended and won't be here for this race. Kelly.
Rick, I actually had a chance to talk with both Adam Stevens and Cole Pern, crew chief on the 78, about the incident. And for Adam's part, he said he had absolutely no intention of stopping at the 78 pit box. He was simply trying to walk back to their trailer where their wadded up car was, and by the nature of those tight pit boxes, tight pit lane at Indy, he obviously had to walk by the 78. He said if he hadn't been taunted, he never would have stopped, that he wasn't even mad about the incident because he thought it was clearly a racing accident. But I can tell you that he and Cole Pern had dinner Friday night, both teams getting along just fine. They're very good at sharing information, and none of that should change. Obviously, for the 78 now not having 2 of those crew members, Cole Pern telling me he really doesn't know what to expect. They'll have to find out after their first pit stop. They've got 2 very experienced veterans, though, filling in, so he feels good about that. And he says we'll see how it plays out, but they can only get better.
Well, we will see how it plays out, and that's the question. The problem with making that change is, if the 78 has a chance to win coming down pit road with 4 to go and have a bad pit stop, well, guess what? They're not going to be happy with that. So I understand teams have to make decisions. Those employees, those pit crew members are employees of Joe Gibbs Racing and had an encounter with one of their superiors. And I understand that that's not acceptable. But man, we're racing. I mean, we're competing. We need that passion. Nobody threw a punch. Nobody got hurt. Some feelings got hurt. Well, that's emotion, man. That's what this sport's all about. So I would have preferred that be left alone, but I don't run Joe Gibbs racing. But my opinion is it could have long-term ramifications that aren't good if the 78 struggles the next several weeks because of bad pit stops.
Well, it absolutely could continue for sure, depending on the pit stops. But as we go back to qualifying here in under 2 minutes, I was surprised. Rick, you asked, what's Kyle Busch? Is this a strategy? I thought they were pretty safe, and it was a decent strategy because I didn't think cars could go out and go faster. Well, Trevor Bayne went out and went faster. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. went out and went faster. Almirola and Dillon went out on the racetrack, went faster. Now, they didn't get in front of Kyle Busch, but now I'm not feeling as good for this 18 car. Definitely don't feel good about the 88 of Dale Earnhardt Jr., who's on the cut line. So with a minute 30 to go, these cars have to decide. Like the 88, he's on the racetrack now. He can't wait, Jeff. He can't wait.
Gotta go.
It takes so long to get around this big 2.5 mile triangle.
And it's, if you are trying to save tires, how do you do that? I mean, as a driver, how do you know how to pace yourself to run a certain speed so that you're safely in, but you save your tires? I don't know how you do that. So we also see Eric Jones at the bottom of the screen. You see where he is compared to Dale Earnhardt Jr. So he is trying to pick up the pace. I don't know if he went out and had a bad run or if he was trying to save tires. He was 6th fastest overall in practice yesterday, so we felt like he had a good car.
Well, I don't think there's enough cars on the racetrack to bump the 18, but I do think that the 88 and the 41, if they don't improve, they could be in trouble.
Yeah, the 88 is out there now. What Eric Jones's time is being compared to is what Dale Earnhardt Jr. ran the first time he was out there. Now Dale Earnhardt Jr. is back out on the racetrack, so he's going to be compared to his time, which we're seeing on the bottom of the screen. And again, with just under 30 seconds to go, very few are going to be able to get around and start their lap. They have to make sure to start their lap prior to that clock running out.
Yeah, the one you got to watch here, I think, is Austin Dillon. He's just coming in off the racetrack. He's in 23rd. There's 3 cars behind him on the racetrack right now. Actually 5, but 3 with a good shot to beat him. That we're seeing Junior, Kurt Busch, and Danica Patrick. So I'd say Austin Dillon and maybe even Eric Almirola there could be in trouble.
Well, and the 88's going to need a good turn 3, Rick. He gave some back across the tunnel. So as he tries to back up the entrance to turn 3, seems like a little movement in the back of that car. It's all about getting back to the gas, down in 3rd gear, accelerating off the corner. It's a long way to the start-finish line, but it looks like he's going to do it.
Well, he's in the green, but Kurt Busch is out on the track now as well, and I believe started his lap prior to the clock running out, so Kurt Busch could still jump back up and get ahead of Austin Dillon, but Kurt Busch right now is below the cut line. Now it's Almirola. We'll see if they're able to fight back. Danica Patrick.
Wow, and Kyle Busch will be the last car to make it out of round 1 in the 24th position. So probably closer than they planned, but we'll see if it works out. Obviously save some life in the tires, Rick.
If he did save tires, that's the perfect way to do it. Last guy to get in.
We'll be back. Talk to the drivers after round 1. And welcome back to NASCAR Monster Energy Cup Series qualifying, presented by Ford Performance. Round 1 is complete. You can catch all the action of NASCAR on NBC with the NBC Sports app. Get closer with alternate camera angles, driver stats, and track information. It's all on the NBC Sports app. Take a look at the 25th through 38th positions that were set after round 1. Eric Almirola, the first one that did not advance into round 2. All the way down through the field, Derek Cope and Jeffrey Earnhardt will have the 37th and 38th starting positions. Marty.
Let's chat with Eric Almirola. As you mentioned, one of the first cut out of this first round, and it's tough doing one-day qualifying, isn't it, when you got to go race the car? How was it for you?
Loose, really loose. It's sort of a product of impound qualifying, and we just, being new at this for everybody, and not making but just one run at it yesterday. We were loose, but we were tight in race trim, so we had to free our car up for race trim and then make a pretty big stab at trying to retighten the car up for qualifying trim, and we just haven't been able to find a happy medium for qualifying trim. But I feel pretty good about our car in race trim. I think we're competitive, and we had to make all those adjustments to free our car up for the race, and we just kind of had to deal with it for qualifying. So just way too loose right there to go fast.
Kelly, no doubt about it. It's a balance. You know, you got to be ready for the race, but got to get it ready for qualifying too.
Right, and with that impound qualifying, only limited changes these teams will be able to make after qualifying ahead of the race. Austin Dillon qualified 26, so what are you hoping you'll have a different feel for in your car come race time?
Just grip. We've been fighting a little bit of speed and grip together, but we're looking at the 31. He's got a pretty good car right now and been qualifying pretty good, so we got to head toward their setup and just tighten our car up. We'll be fine when it comes to race time. I think we'll be able to make some moves, but just hadn't had it as far as qualifying's go in the last couple months, so we'll keep working on it and see what we can do come race time. All
right, they're going to lean on their teammates in the 31, Rick.
Qualifying and racing on the same day in the Monster Energy Cup Series. Truex Jr. was fastest, and Kyle Busch 24th. Both advanced to round 2. Cars waiting to roll out, waiting for the green flag of the second round of qualifying from Pocono. And
well,
now,
this round, Rick, we're going to figure out if Kyle Busch is saving tires or not.
Yeah.
You can't save tires in this round. To make the top 12, you're going to have to lay a lap time down. The competition is much tougher to get in the top 12 than it is the top 24. So we'll know fairly quickly if he was trying to save any tires.
is a crew chief looking at the fact that the race is in 3 hours, or is that oblivious to everybody that's a part of what's going on right now?
Oblivious. I mean, this right now, it's about qualifying. You don't worry about the race, whether it's Friday, Saturday, or Sunday morning. At this point, you're worried about qualifying and to get the best starting position possible. So you'll worry about the race when qualifying's over.
And one thing we're seeing here that was different than most tracks, normally we see a car leave pit road and he's digging. He's in the gas, going through gears. Well, this racetrack is so big that the cars today, you see Joey Logano, he's just now trying to start to build speed as he approaches the tunnel turn. So he went through the majority of that back straightaway as slowly as he could just to keep laps off his tires, keep time off his tires. So that's how big this racetrack is.
There's Logano taking the green flag. And again, this round just 10 minutes in length for the 24 drivers to go out and get a time, hoping to break into the top 12. 12 drivers will advance to the final round, and that will determine the top 12 starting positions as well as the pole. But right now the goal is to be in the top 12.
People talk about the tunnel, how tough of a corner that is. 200 miles an hour, Rick, into the tunnel corner. Now going down into turn 3, which is the longest, slowest corner on the racetrack. So as they turn down in, you see about 165 going down into the 140s. He goes down into third gear, shifting basically all 3 corners, I would imagine, qualifying. Don't you think, Jeff?
You might not in the tunnel turn. You might carry enough speed with new tires through the tunnel turn and maybe faster actually not to downshift and let the momentum carry you through the tunnel turn.
So Denny Hamlin currently has the fastest lap turn at 50.606. That's faster than round 1. Martin Truex Jr. ran at 50.872. So speeds are picking up now in this second round. Matt Kenseth, Ryan Blaney. Ryan Blaney coming back to a racetrack that he dearly loves now. He was able to get his first career win in the Monster Energy Cup Series earlier this year in June.
And we see a lot of repeat winners here, Rick. And with the races only 6 weeks apart, Denny Hamlin did it his rookie year. Dale Earnhardt Jr. has done it here. So we see a lot of winners that win both races in a season. Now we're on board the coolest view, the helmet view, down into turn 1. Hear that downshift. It's just unbelievable to hear the engine rev up when they go down into third gear.
So he talked about shifting, so you're going to hear him upshift. There's the upshift. Now, will he downshift in the tunnel? Sometimes in qualifying you don't want to because new tires will swing you through there. Let's listen. No downshift. That's just the car bottoming out on the racetrack. So in the race, when the pace falls down, you will definitely downshift in the tunnel. But in Q-Trim, major grip, tons of side grip, rear grip. You just try to sling the car down through there and not downshift, because that slows the car down.
He did downshift entering 3, and across the stripe for Kyle Larson, 7th quickest.
I don't think he's going to be happy with that lap. I'm not sure that 51.20 is going to get him through.
And it's difficult. We heard Eric Almirola talking about the setups, and you know, if this was normal qualifying and you were loose in race film, well, you just slide more nose weight to it. You just do, you know, you change the left rear shock, you change the left rear spring, you do things just to get it around here for one lap that you can't do today because you have to race that car. So we may see this shift the field. Some cars that normally would qualify well may not qualify as well, but they could still race well.
And Rick, you know, the adjustments, well, it's kind of a laundry list and it can be complicated. The simple fact is you can adjust air pressure, you can adjust some grill tape. If you see a great shot of Martin Truex Jr., you never want to take your hand off the wheel, but you have to reach over, get it down to the 3rd gear. Pretty calm on the upshift, you'll see right here, 3rd to 4th. So tape, air pressure, you can adjust crossweight, track bar, a couple things like that, but no major adjustments. None of the big fundamental changes you would make for qualifying.
When you say track bar, the driver has that inside the car. So are the crews adjusting it on top of what the driver can?
No, most of these teams now have worked in where they have so much adjustment from the cockpit that the driver can handle everything.
But you can only adjust one side of the track bar as a driver. The team can adjust the left side. The driver can only adjust the right. So if you went to make a Q run, the crew could make that change on the left side that he currently today can't.
Right.
Because of the rules.
Everyone inside the top 10 really has a faster time this round than they did the first round.
Well, I think Kyle Busch proved that he was saving tire because he picked up over a half a second. Almost a full second. 9/10 of a second is what he's picked up from the first round. So I think we were dead on there thinking he was just saving some tire.
Well, he did it great. I mean, I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you can know to slow the car down enough to end up being 24th. I mean, if I tried to do that, I'd have been 34th. But he did it as well as it could be done.
Kyle Busch has been very good at this racetrack, but has not had the finish that he wants, because this is one of 2 tracks for Kyle Busch that he has not won at. Charlotte and Pocono, the 2 racetracks where Kyle Busch, that are active tracks right now in the Monster Energy Cup Series that Kyle Busch has not won on.
So you mentioned it, Jeff. Danica Patrick chose to downshift in the tunnel. It looked like she lost some time. She was only a few hundredths off, downshifted, lost a couple tenths. Here in turn 3, braking about even, losing a little bit more speed, but lost most of her time through the tunnel.
And how about that shifter? Look at how high it is. It's a little higher than we normally see shifters. That's just all driver comfort. That's where she wants it. She feels like she can shift the smoothest right there. There's no right or wrong answer. It's what the driver wants.
This is going to be tough for a car like the 88 to transfer through. Remember, they had run twice in round 1. So this is the 3rd run on tires. And I know, as you mentioned, Rick, most guys are going faster. Well, I don't expect to continue to see that. I think at some point the tires lose grip. I'm thinking the 88 might have found that limit.
Earnhardt Jr., 18th of the 19 that have been out on the racetrack. Chris Buescher, the only one that's slower in this qualifying session. But Chris Buescher, a win here at Pocono.
Yeah, you mentioned laps on the tires. Well, Eric Jones, he was one of those guys that also had to make 2 runs in the first session. Wondered out loud if maybe he tried to save tires and, you know, save too much and didn't post a good enough speed to get into the top 24. Had to go back out and make another run. So you can see he's right there where he needs to be to move Chase Elliott out of the top 12.
But so much can happen in this long, flat, sweeping, forever of a corner, turn 3. He got through there really well. Started to gain a little time back, and I think it'll be okay down here at start finish.
Going to be close, though. He's 11th for Eric Jones. The cut line now just below Keselowski. Chase Elliott on the outside of the top 12.
He's got good cars that haven't gone on the racetrack yet either. You see Kurt Busch that is coming to get the checkered. Also Ryan Newman and Jimmy Johnson on the racetrack.
I think Keselowski has to make a decision here. He's currently sitting on pit road on the cut line. He probably has to leave pit road, I imagine, with just a touch over a minute left. Maybe a minute and 5 seconds to get back around to the start finish. So he's watching this just like we are. The comparison to Jimmy Johnson right now, feeling pretty good about it.
Ricky Stenhouse Jr. below the cut line in 19th. Dale Earnhardt Jr., Danica Patrick. Chris Buescher and potentially Newman, as Jimmy Johnson goes 14th quickest. He's not going to be able to make it into the final round. Newman right now doesn't look like he's going to make it either, as he's almost 0.3 of a second off of what Brad Keselowski's time was.
Well, Brad Keselowski essentially has stood on his time now, Rick. He's still standing or sitting on pit road, so he's not going to make another lap. So you have Ryan Newman right here exiting turn 3. Definitely not going to move Keselowski. But also on the racetrack, the 42 of Kyle Larson, the 24 of Chase Elliott, they're now taking the green flag. So basically, Paul Wolfe and Brad Keselowski, they're going to watch much like we are to see if they advance to the next round.
Kenseth just went across the start-finish line, so he's going to try another lap.
You know, Rick,
20 seconds to go in this round.
And Rick, you know, Brad, why would he not make another lap? Well, if he doesn't think it's going to get through, or even if it only improves him one starting position. Remember, you mentioned it. You have to start on these tires. So I think Paul Wolfe and Brad say, you know what, we're going to save the basically 2 laps on our tires. If we end up 13th or 14th, that's fine.
Yeah, and 13th and 14th versus maybe being 7th or 8th. They don't think they have pole speed. If they thought they had pole speed, the problem is they're not going to have pole speed if they have to run on their tires again anyway. So take your chances here. I think it's a worthwhile game.
Kyle Larson, we saw he was on the clock, and then it looked as though after he went through turn 1, he wasn't in position to get into the top 12, and they just shut it down more or less. Well, he just goes across the stripe, but doesn't improve into the top 12. He only goes to 15th.
Yeah, Rick, I'm sure the 42 knew, hey, that wasn't good through turn 1. Why run 2 more corners on the tires?
So the top 12 are now advancing to round number 3. 13 through 24 set. Fastest was Denny Hamlin. Round 2 now complete. The drivers that don't advance into round 3, starting with Chase Elliott, Jimmy Johnson, Matt Kenseth, Kyle Larson, all the way down to Chris Buescher. Those positions now set 13 through 24. We had referenced the 42 of Kyle Larson and him aborting his qualifying run after turn 1. Well, this is why.
Steve, you mentioned it. The driver knew that he couldn't make lap time. Well, this is why. As he ride along, he goes to the bottom. Big wheel movement to the right. Got way loose right in the middle of the corner, and all he could do was correct it. Well, he knew right then he was done. He knew there was no sense of running through the tunnel through turn 3. All you're doing is eating laps on tires. So accept your situation and make the best of it. And at that point, the best of it is saving your tires.
So Kyle Larson, one of the 12 that doesn't advance into round 3. When we come back, we'll start with round 3. Denny Hamlin still fastest. You're watching NASCAR Monster Energy Cup Series Qualifying, presented by Ford Performance. A unique day, the fact that it's qualifying and racing. Back-to-back Monster Energy Cup Series racing from Pocono. The race coverage begins later today on NBCSN at 3 p.m. And you will be ready for the race. Take a look at what's coming up. NASCAR America pre-race at 12:30. Countdown to green at 2:30. 3 o'clock. The green flag will fly on the Monster Energy Series racing from Pocono, and post-race show at 6:30. And then IndyCar Series racing from Mid-Ohio at 7 o'clock. You will definitely get your racing fill today.
On that pre-race, there is a great story about Felix Sabates and Kyle Petty. That is a really, really cool story worth watching.
Felix Sabates very sick, to the point where he even thought he was on his deathbed, and we get a deep, in-depth look at what that was like for Felix, his family, and everyone involved. Very scary time. Again, that's pre-race show as round 3 is underway. And once again, Steve, as you mentioned, not being too hard on the tires until they get about midway through, straight away from turn 1 to turn 2.
And even more than just the tires, it seemed like he shut the engine off there, Jeff, to even save some water temperature. So while the teams on pit road are allowed to cool the engine, you can cool the water in the engine down substantially, and maybe even the radiator with the mass of the aluminum. But the solid steel block, you know, these cast iron blocks, very hard to get the temperature out of there quickly at all. So that is going to be a big deal for these cars to see if they overheat.
Coming to the green, Joey Logano. This will determine the top 12 starting positions. It was a 5-minute clock for round number 3. They'll all have one shot at it. Denny Hamlin had turned the fastest lap up to this point in qualifying, 50.606. We'll see if the tire fall off will come into play in round 3.
Moving around a lot as it rolls through that bumps in the middle of 3. It's a relatively new paved racetrack, but it's not a smooth racetrack. 50.98, that's a little bit off the speed he ran earlier. Well, he ran a 51 flat in round 2. I'm sorry. He actually ran quicker.
Yeah, Denny Hamlin very close to what he ran in round 2. 50.63 for Hamlin. Casey Kane, last week's winner. 4th quickest of the 4 that have taken time. Kevin Harvick, another one of the drivers that has not won at Pocono. Blaney, 2nd quickest on his lap. Harvick, 3rd quickest. 6 of the 12 have gone. Clint Boyer in the 14. He now is on the clock.
Came out of turn 3 with a lot of speed. You can see he's actually faster than Denny Hamlin as he approaches turn 1. That means he did a really good job. Oh, free right in the middle of the corner. That's going to hurt his speed. You'll see that speed start to, well, actually he leveled out. I thought it was going to start to fall back big time. You can see the back of the car roll around, but Clint did a great job of managing that.
McMurray in the green, Kyle Busch in the green. Compared to Denny Hamlin's lap, Kyle Busch very strong, 0.3 of a second right now ahead of what Hamlin has run. Clint Boyer doesn't look like he's going to have enough straightaway to catch Denny Hamlin. He is 4th quickest.
Jamie McMurray, though, Rick, this is going to put him at the top of the charts currently at a 55.
But it's short-lived.
Look at this. Look at this lap.
That's a big lap.
Yes, it is. 50.175 for Kyle Busch. Almost 0.4 of a second faster than Jamie McMurray. And now Adam Stevens and Kyle Busch looking very smart from that first round.
Well, Martin Truex was trending into the green into turn 1 as we see Eric Jones finishing his lap. Martin Truex only 6/100ths off Kyle Busch with a lot of lap left to go.
This could be interesting as far as the first row. From what we saw in Indianapolis a week ago, the 2 drivers, the 78 and the 18, crashed out. And now there's a good possibility they could start side by side at Pocono.
And could they pit running 1st and 2nd? And Martin Truex Jr. with pit crew members that have not been on that team this year. That'll be a head-to-head comparison if they do sit on the front row.
And across the stripe, and that will be the front row. Kyle Busch and Martin Truex Jr. And not only are they going to start side by side, but I believe they will be very close as far as pit stalls as well, because pit selection was chosen yesterday. They were able to choose their pit stalls yesterday based upon what took place in Indianapolis. The reason for that, there's just not enough time from the end of this qualifying session to set up all the pit stalls for this racetrack. So because it was a one-day show as far as qualifying in the race, they were picked earlier. Martin Truex Jr. has pit stall 3. Kyle Busch, pit stall 1. Again, the big controversy at the end of, well, not at the end, somewhat in the middle of the race when Adam Stevens went into the 78 pit box because 2 crew members were, as they were saying, egging him on. Those 2 pit crew members have been suspended by Joe Gibbs Racing for this race. So now we'll be able to compare these pit stops almost side by side. There'll be one stall in between the two teams.
Well, Rick, it started well before on pit road. This was on the starts. For the first half of the race, they raced very well together, kind of let each other go. Played nice as teammates. Here they decide to race, or Kyle Busch basically decided it was time to race. Forced the 78 down to the corner. The 78 got loose, up the track, took out the 18. Coach Gibbs in disbelief. And then as Adam Stevens was leaving his pit box, walking by the 78, this is what happened.
Come on, where to go? Well, now you want to race? If you let off what I want to beat you. I don't care. Get out of my box. I don't care who you are. Get out of my box. All right, pal. I don't give a who you are. Get out of my box. All right, cowboy. Tough guy. I am. Oh, good for you. Hey, man, just walk the away. Go on.
Jeff Burton, you mentioned earlier, emotions. Emotions running very high, especially when the two best cars at Indianapolis last week end up wrecking. And those two cars out of the race, it ended up Casey Kane was the winner. Now, two pit crew members from the 78 team, they were suspended by Joe Gibbs Racing because of the alliance and the fact that the 78 team leases their pit crew from Joe Gibbs Racing. Very talented, extremely talented pit crew members that aren't here. They will have, their positions will have to be filled, and it could become a very big topic of discussion during this race if the 78 doesn't have a good pit stop.
Well, it could, but remember, go back about Indy. These two teams dominated Indy. I mean, when they wrecked, it gave an opportunity for someone else to win that race. Who was going to win that race? Kyle Busch and his team, they've really not been able to catch Martin Truex Jr. and his team this year. They had gotten themselves where they were in front of Martin Truex Jr.'s team. Bad pit stop, put them behind. So then at some point, who's going to make the decision? Or, okay, we're no longer going to play nice on this restart. I supported the opinion that they needed to start racing each other, because as hard as it is to pass at Indy, as it is here, you better get that lead when you can. So when they started racing, they had a wreck. It was a racing wreck. That's what happens when teams are trying to race. Nobody did anything wrong. Nobody did anything malicious. It was just a wreck by two guys trying to win the race. That's why we tuned in to watch. Good racing. That's what we saw.
Hey, Rick, remember the 18 saved those tires in round one.
Yes.
I'd say it paid off in round three.
Fourth time they're going to start 1 and 2 this season. A beautiful day here in the Pocono Mountains. Let's take a look at where the top 4 drivers will line up for today's race. Ryan Blaney, his lone career win came just a little over a month ago. 6 weeks, the difference between the June race and now. So Blaney has a win from this racetrack. Kevin Harvick, though, does not have a win here. Still looking for his first win at Pocono. Marty.
Well, Rick, I think you can say wow for that lap for Kyle Busch. Did that even surprise you a little bit about how quick that was?
It did. You know, I felt like I hit it pretty good. Gave up a couple things in a couple spots, but overall felt like it was a really good lap. I was going to come over the radio and say, man, that's close. You know, I think that's right on target, but obviously it was way better. So just proud of these guys. The adjustments really worked for us there through rounds and got us to where we needed to be in order to continually get faster each time out. So that normally you don't ever really see that happen on rerun tires, cycled scuffs, you know. So obviously our M&M's Caramel Camry is pretty fast, and looking forward to today's race. You know, it's a great opportunity for us starting up front, being able to be in clean air like we were here last time. So hopefully we can just do the right things to put ourselves in a better spot at the end.
In round one, was it saving tires? And if it was, were you a little worried there? It got close, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you got to save a little bit, but obviously I saved a little too much probably. So, you know, also the balance of the car just wasn't quite right. So I didn't want to push too hard and get myself in trouble and make it worse than what it already looked to be. And so it was definitely closer than we would have expected it to be. You know, certainly I think you feel more better about it when you're 18th or 20th, something in there, rather than right on the border of 24th.
Kyle Busch certainly starts off his Sunday the right way, Rick.
Thanks, Marty. Kelly.
Such a big moment for Casey Kane, getting to kiss those bricks last week at Indy. What's it like now, Casey, showing up to the track? You've got the winless streak behind you. You're in the playoffs.
It's a lot better. It feels really good. It was actually really cool to a lot of other teams, guys on other teams came up and congratulated myself and my team at different times that I saw throughout the weekend, which is really feels good. I haven't had any of that in a while, so that was nice. But yeah, we have a pretty good, great Clip Chevrolet Shark Week car, and you know, I felt really good. I should have just drove straighter into turn 1. I tried to use my brakes to kind of control my loose end. I lost at least 2 or 3 tenths there, but it wasn't going to get us nowhere near Kyle Busch, but it was going to be better than where we ended up. So we'll just go from there, and I think we'll have a good race.
Your crew chief, Keith Rotten, keeps emphasizing to me that you need to improve in qualifying as a team. Well, now you're the top Hendrick car. You made it into the final round. What can you do with that 12th place starting position today in the race?
Well, it gets us a lot closer to where we want to be. A lot of times we're right on the strategy mark, like where people start doing other things, we're the last car that doesn't. So hopefully today this puts us in a much better spot throughout the entire race, and you know, things work out again like last week and we end up front.
All right, Casey Kane looking for the win here in Pocono.
Looking forward to the start of this race. Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr. will start side by side. It's time now to send it over to Chris DeVoe, Dale Jarrett, and Kyle Petty, NASCAR America pre-race show.